Hey guys, and welcome to the garden tour. I'm super excited to take you through a whole year here in the garden, starting right now in the spring, so that you can see what the garden looks like through every single stage of just planting all the way through the summer growth and into the fall for harvest. This is a year when many of us are planning on growing more of our own food than ever before, so I hope that this gives you inspiration, and I'm really excited to be a part of the Homesteaders of America growing a year's worth of food garden tour. So let's take you into our regular annual vegetable garden, and we'll start there. So this is the main part of our annual vegetable garden, and one of my favorite things is you're going to get to see all of my cool weather crops, and we just planted just 5 days ago the warm weather crops. So the great thing about doing a lot of succession planting or gardening by the seasons is I get 3 to 4 crops out of the same piece of ground and dirt every single year. So here we have our garlic. So I plant my garlic in October, plant it in the fall, and this will be ready to harvest about mid-July, sometime in July. Over on this side, I just put in some more onion sets, and then I also have broccoli and cauliflower. So these onion sets I just planted today. The broccoli and cauliflower went in about 4 to 5 weeks ago, so about 3 to 4 weeks before our last average frost date. Now, I've got some more onions here on the back side of the garlic. They're all in the alum family, so those are great to grow together. They're totally fine. And actually, if you're doing companion planting, onions and broccoli do really well together, so I like to do intercropping. So I've got these onion sets that just went in, and then here I've got these broccoli and cauliflower plants. And I know that these broccoli and cauliflower, in about 4 to 5 weeks, they're going to be ready to harvest, and then I'm going to be pulling them out. And these onions won't be that large yet, so these aren't going to be ready to harvest until probably about August is usually when my onions are ready to harvest. And so right now they're small enough and they get along anyways as far as companion planting and planting near one another. And so this is a great way to plant these onions in between these other plants, and then I'll pull these up when the onions get to be a larger size and need to have more space. So these onions, I started from seed inside the house way back in, goodness, was the end of February. And these onion sets have been in the ground since the first part of April, end of March. And I do multiple varieties, but I always do storage onions. So my goal is to be able to harvest and store we love to do fresh eating, of course. Who doesn't love food fresh from the garden? But my ultimate goal is to be able to preserve the food that we're growing to take us through an entire year till the next year. And so I have got the copra onions, or copra, however you like to pronounce those onions. Those we have grown for a couple of years. They store really great. I still have some in the house from last year's garden that we haven't went through yet. Great storage onions. I'm also doing some Patterson, and I started both of those from seed this year, but I decided I didn't quite have enough onions, and so I ordered another storage onion variety that I've never tried before. I'm super excited, and that's the blush onion scents that I just showed you that I put in. So they are a light pink. They're kind of a cross between a red and a white yellow onion, so you get a blush color, hence the name, but they're a storage onion. Most of your storage onions are going to be your yellow onions. There's a few red varieties. I haven't tried them, but normally my red onions just don't store as long. So I'm really excited to try these blush varieties as part of our storage onions too. So then as we come back here, you can see that this is the area that I'm doing a lot of most of my cool weather crops in. I've got just one section here that has not been planted yet that I'll use for succession planting and doing some more beets and carrots as we get a little further on into the season, and maybe a little bit of lettuce. But I have got spinach and lettuce here. So this lettuce was started in February. So you can see it's quite a bit larger, but when it's in the cooler weather, even though it's cool weather lettuce, it doesn't grow as fast. So these are definitely ready to start harvesting. And then I've got some spinach here. And then over on this side, I've got my snow peas. So I just direct sowed these snow peas the first part of April. So you can see they're just starting to climb and beginning to trellis up here. So probably about another 4 weeks before we'll have a harvest on those. And then on the other side, so on this side of the garden, I've got some more lettuce, and you can see these ones are a lot more tiny. So I like to stagger, or it's succession planting or stagger planting a lot of my greens, especially lettuce, because lettuce, you can't really preserve lettuce. Some people will dehydrate it and grind it up into a green powder. I'd rather do that with things like beet greens or spinach. But lettuce, it's not like you're going to really be able to freeze it or do a whole lot with it. And you can only eat so much fresh lettuce. So I like to stagger plant. And so right now, these are my smaller ones. So you can see obviously those heads of lettuce that I have over there, we're going to be harvesting now. And then in a few more weeks, these will be ready to start harvesting. And then I will start another smaller row of lettuce. And so I've always got fresh lettuce coming on, but never like a huge patch or rows upon rows of lettuce. And then we've also got, I like to take advantage of as much space as possible in the garden. So here is where my overhead sprinkler goes when we need to overhead sprinkle. And so at the base of there, I planted a couple more snow peas because these are going to be able to vine up and go right upside this pole. And then again, I put in some of those onions next to these two cauliflower plants because these, once they produce the cauliflower, I'll be able to pull them up and that'll be perfect growing conditions right here for the onions. And then I just have a few more of these lettuce. And this lettuce is really fun. This is an heirloom Merlot lettuce. And this lettuce self-seeded in my high tunnel over the winter months. And then I just transplanted it here when I needed to put my onions into, or excuse me, my tomatoes in the high tunnel, not my onions. So this is really fun. This actually started sprouting and growing in the middle of January, and you can see a couple more weeks and this will be full harvest mode. I've been taking just a few little leaves off of it here and there. So for the rest of the annual vegetable garden, so here is where I do the majority of our winter squash and my zucchini. So we use what's called the hilling method. It's just the way that I've always grown my squash. So a little girl growing up, my parents always had a huge garden. My dad was raised through the Great Depression and always grew a large garden. And that's the way he was taught to grow. And so it's the way we do it. So we do the hilling method. So we hill up the dirt. And then I usually plant 7 seeds on top of each of these hills. And usually about 2 to 3 inches apart. And then after if they all germinate, then I just thin them out to usually 3 to 4 plants per hill. And then these will vine out. They'll vine out and go down the hill and cover all of this area. And they'll come out a little bit into the lettuce, which is fine. One of the great things about squash is when it starts to vine out, it actually, a lot of your squash will begin to produce a compound that helps to keep the weeds down, especially your pumpkin and some of your winter squash. So that's a really great thing. So I've got planted all through here. I've got sugar pie pumpkins, butternut squash. I'm waiting on of all of the seeds that I do, seed saving that we have, the one that I did not have any of was acorn squash. So I have one hill here waiting for my acorn squash seed to come in the mail so that I can get it planted. But I've got sugar pie pumpkins, butternut squash, some spaghetti squash. I will have some acorn, and then our zucchini. So here we're trying a new trellising system. We're doing these archways with hog panels and just some metal T-posts. And I'm really excited for that. So you can see I've got a whole row here behind me. So on these ones on both sides, I have planted our heirloom green Tar Heel pole beans that my family's been seed saving for over 100 years. So we've got those planted on the outside. And then on the inside here, these were actually planted before we put the trellis in. But I've got some more cauliflower and broccoli and lettuce. And then we just direct sowed Brussels sprouts from seed. Now, Brussels sprouts, unlike a lot of your other brassicas, they take a lot longer. Brussels sprouts are long growing. They take about 120 days before they're ready to harvest. And ideally, right at the time they get large enough for you to begin harvesting, you want it timed so that they hit your first average frost date in the fall. That makes them so much sweeter and they taste, oh my goodness, the flavor is like night and day. You want to let them go through a frost. So I started you saw the size of my cauliflower and my broccoli and other areas of the garden, and even these, I started these a lot earlier. I don't start my Brussels sprouts early because I want them to hit that full maturity age right around the end of September, first part of October. So we just now are direct sowing those Brussels sprouts. In fact, I see one little seed there. Looks like it's just starting to pop up. We just sowed these about 5 days ago. But we put them on the inside of this because as the beans grow and vine up, they're going to grow up and create shade, which is perfect because your cauliflowers, most anything in your brassica family, prefer a little bit cooler weather. So by the time we hit mid-summer, when we start to get some of those really hot days, those beans are going to be all the way up and over, and they're going to create a great little microclimate for my brassicas that will be in here. But if we go further down here, you'll see this tunnel looks a little bit different than the other ones. So this one, I have got some polyfilm on top, so some greenhouse plastic here, film. And the reason for that is because we increased the amount of tomatoes that we're growing this year compared to any other year. So normally I grow about 20 paste tomatoes, and that's enough to take my family of 4 through all of our tomato needs for the year. So tomato sauce and stewed tomatoes and all the fun things, salsa you make and preserve with tomatoes. But my son is getting older. He hit his teenage years, and not quite sure what our food supply may end up looking like with all of the, stuff that's going on in the world right now. So we decided to increase our tomatoes, but I ran out of room in our high tunnel, and living here in the Pacific Northwest where we get a lot of rain and we're typically cooler summer months, if I don't grow tomatoes under cover, then I get blight. And once your plants get blight, your harvest and the plant's pretty much ruined for that year. You can try some treatments, but for the most part, they're just ruined. So prevention is key and a lot easier to deal with. So we planted the tomatoes on the inside of these hog panels so that the plastic could be on the outside and protect them. And then same thing, I've got some lettuce here. So as these tomatoes grow up, they're indeterminate. So they're San Marzano Lungo heirloom tomatoes, in case you were wondering, but they're gonna grow really, really tall. And so we're gonna be able to trellis and tie them up to these hog panels, which is gonna be great. But then they will provide the shade here for this lettuce. The other thing is, I said I like to get multiple crops out of the area. I'll be pulling this lettuce up once it's fully harvestable and we go through it. And then I'll be putting some carrots in here. So I'll be able to follow with my crop rotation by putting some carrot root crops in. And by that time, the soil will be shaded by all of the other crops, which is great because carrots like to germinate in a little bit cooler weather, I found, than in midsummer. So that should help them and keep them growing really well. And then we have on this backside, on this very last hog panel, is where I planted all of my cucumbers. So I do a lot of pickling cucumbers. We love canned, obviously just canned. Garlic dill is our favorite type of pickle. My great grandma's mustard pickled relish recipe, and then we love fermented pickles. So I actually planted those on the outside so that all of my cucumbers this year will be able to be trellised up here. That should help cut down on the downy and powdery mildew, which we dealt with quite a bit last year. We had a really wet, cool summer, even by Pacific Northwest standards. So I'm excited because they'll be growing up, and it's going to allow me to get more into the same amount of garden space. And then on the other side here, I've got one last row, and this is the rest of our onions. So those blush onion sets that I just got, and then my Patterson onions that I started from seed and put in a lot earlier are on this row. So now let's move over to the 2 new sections of the garden that we added this year. So this is a brand new section that we're using for the annual vegetable garden. We've expanded, so it's about a 20 by 10 area. And this is where the high tunnel, which if you watched it in my other videos, you saw our high tunnel, went through the storm and was doing a lot of listing, even though it got us through last year. But we moved it. So this is where the high tunnel was last year. So this year right now, I've got some of those cool weather crops going in, and we'll do some succession planting here about midsummer. Right now, I've got carrots coming up, some daikon radish, Napa cabbage, and then I've got another kind of cabbage. Oh my goodness, it's a new variety I'm trying, and I just forgot the name. I'll pop it in during editing and do an overlay there. And then I've got beets, and then we have more hog panels. So here is where we're gonna be growing our shelled beans. So I've got our October beans, which is a shelled bean that my family's been seed saving for a very long time, that we'll put there. And then I've got 2 more rows of Brussels sprouts. And then I've got another section there. I'm not sure if I'm going to do more carrots, but I know I'm going to be doing some type of carrot or beet most likely, maybe a few more radishes. So it's one of my areas that I can do some crop rotation with during the season for some of those crops that come to harvest a lot faster. They don't take as long to grow. And then I've got one more hog panel on the back there where we are growing an heirloom Cherokee bean that was sent to us that's been seed saved since 1868. So I'm really excited. I've never grown it before, but I love heirloom beans. I'm actually part Cherokee, and so I'm really excited to have a part of that heritage and to be growing that variety this year. So I cannot wait until those ones sprout. I'm super excited. Now for the high tunnel. She got a makeover, she got a lot of repairs done, and a new home over here on some virgin ground. So this was just part of our yard, which was pasture land for a number of years. And so let me show you what we did. So it's been pretty cool and rainy here today, so I haven't actually opened this up yet because there's no sunshine. It's warm enough, but overnight time, especially on clear nights when it's colder, we still keep this boarded up. Well, not boarded up, but sealed up. That's the word I'm looking for. So we did a lot more bracing. And you can see it's no longer leaning. So we were able to get this back upright, still using, believe it or not, the exact same frame. So this, you can see that video where I talked about how this was an old carport that we bought, that you get them for like Costco or like some of those big box stores that have like canvas over them, use them for carports and sheds. This frame, my husband and I were doing some math, and it's almost 20 years old. We've had it for like 16 years. It's been my greenhouse for going on close to year 8. I think we're at year 8 now. So we did a lot more bracing and we moved it over. So you can see we put bracing here in the middle. Before, we didn't have any bracing in the middle that went across with the wood here. So we put bracing this way and then braced them here. And then on the corners, we also put another brace point at the corners, at the front and the end of it. But the plastic and the fasteners are all the same. And it ended up being the same legs. They got bent actually right here. And so we were able to just pop those off and to cut it off past where it was just straight again in order to repair it. So pretty excited about that. So you can see this is all of the peppers and the rest of the tomatoes went in here. And so I have got over here some Brandywine tomatoes. So these are going to be more for our fresh eating heirloom Brandywine. And then over here, I've got 20 of the San Marzano Lungos, which are the paste tomato that I use for the majority of my preserving. And then on the back side, I have a few yellow cherry tomatoes, which are just going to be for fun. Now, one quick tip. So these just went into the ground. I seed started all of these in March inside the house. It's when you've got a smaller tomato plant like this, and they begin to get their first blossom, I actually pinch off this very first blossom so that it puts more energy back into developing that root system, because these just went into the ground, so the root system can't be that large yet. I only had them in like 1-gallon pots, and these ones were even smaller pots. So I pinch off this first blossom as this comes on so that it gets a stronger root system. And then once it does like the second set, then I let those go and let it start to become our tomatoes. So now I'm going to take you over to, well, kind of like the perennial patch, basically. So we have got a brand new bed of asparagus with asparagus crowns that I planted in last year. So here is, you can see, this were the crowns. These are 1-year-old asparagus. So here's the first one that came up, and I'm just going ahead and letting that fern. I'm not going to harvest off of them this year so that the crown and the root system gets really established, and then I'll have asparagus for years to come. And then I just added, which you're not really going to see a whole lot. Here's one crown that's got a few coming up. I just planted these asparagus crowns about 2 weeks ago, and they're already starting to send some asparagus up. But anytime you are doing asparagus, it's super hard with the perennials. You don't want to harvest the first couple of years. You want all that energy to establish the root system. So these I'm just going to let grow and then fern out, like the ones behind them there that you can see right there that are ferning out. We're just going to let that happen. And one of the things that drives me crazy, if you have this, you're going to know. People will often call it morning glory. This isn't actually morning glory. It's bindweed. It mimics a morning glory flower, so people think it is, but it is so invasive. We literally come out here and weed and pull this up by the roots about 2 times a week. And the only way I know to keep on top of it is just to be diligent and pull up the weeds. I don't know any natural way to actually eradicate this other than just pulling it up. And then over here, so there is the rhubarb and the blueberries. So same thing, I like to do intercropping with like areas. So blueberries and rhubarb both like acidic soil. They grow very well together. So I've got this rhubarb patch. This is one of my smallest, most youngest blueberry bushes. This little blueberry bush is more compact and it's about 4 years old. So this is the first year I'm actually letting the blossoms on it go to fruit. Not asparagus, rhubarb. Asparagus is right behind me. And then these are my larger and older blueberry bushes, but they like a pH of about a 5.5 to 5.5 pH is ideal for blueberries, which is quite acidic. And so by having the rhubarb in with the blueberries, it allows me to only have to amend one area of soil to keep it acidic. And they are very happy growing with one another. And then behind there, if you caught my tour from last year, those are my brand new raspberry plants that were just planted last year. So these are the autumn bearing ones. And you can see, so these will be putting fruit on this fall. They'll usually start about the end of August and September-ish. So they're still fairly small here. And then this is the summer bearing variety. So you can see these ones are quite a bit larger and they've already got blossoms coming on there. So I'll have raspberries from these in June. Okay, so up next is one of my other favorite areas here on the homestead, and that's our grape arbor. So the grapes are a little bit later. They just started leafing out and beginning to blossom, and they're behind me here on our arbor. So this is just 2 grape plants on each side, and believe it or not, in just a month's time, they will have vined and gone all the way up over, and they create an awesome living canopy that provides shade for us in the summer and the hot months, and also a little bit of protection as long as it's not a total downpour from the rain. So this is a great way to take advantage of any type of space you have that would just be, I mean, it's just overhead growing. It's very little ground space, as you can see. I do need to do a little bit of weeding, but this is the base of that grape plant. So this really takes up maybe like 1 square foot, 2 square feet of growing space. Pretty incredible. So now I'm excited. One of the things I was most excited to show you about that we added in new this year was the new hog panel trellises. I'm super excited to try growing my squash on them this year. And then one of the other things is this vertical patio container. Check this out. You guys, is this thing awesome or what? So it's completely stackable, so you can have just one of these. I happen to have 5 tiers up. And this is where I'm growing my strawberries. So these are bare root strawberries. I planted them in February. It does fine. We had snows, we had freezing temps down in the teens. It's done just fine. So these are all growing out. Now the very top layer, I actually have some lime basil and holy basil. So I've got some herbs up there. But this is all of my strawberries, and the reason I'm so excited for this thing is, one, I wasn't sure how the watering system was gonna work. I've actually been very pleased and happy with it. And I wasn't sure with the sun coming if one, like the backside would have more shade and if I would have to turn it a lot, but it hasn't been. It's been pretty even and I haven't had to worry about it. But the reason I'm so excited about this is, one, strawberries send out runners. So they're perennial, but each strawberry crown is really only good for about 3 years. So you do want it to send out runners because that replaces the original plant so that you always have strawberries growing. But they can quickly overtake an area because they spread via runners. But the really big reason I was excited about this and to grow my strawberries in it is because I live in the Pacific Northwest and slugs and snails like to eat strawberries almost more than I do. And so I'm always battling, trying to keep the slugs and the snails out of my strawberries. And especially when they start to turn ripe, it's like they have this sense and they just know when they come in. And I'm sorry, I don't want to eat a strawberry that has a big old bite taken out of it from a slug. So I'm super excited. Now slugs can still climb. If you've dealt with slugs or snails, you know that they can climb up with things, but they have not been climbing up here. Part of that is I have it on our cement, which is pretty hot and dry. So the slugs are a little bit more naturally deterred from trying to crawl, and they haven't discovered them. So I'm so excited because I'm gonna actually have strawberries that I don't have to battle all of the slugs and snails for. And two, another great thing about this is it's on wheels, and so they have little locks, so I have it locked in place right now, but I can move this. So like when we start to hit the cooler temps in the fall, and I want to keep my basil going for a little bit longer, I can just wheel this closer to the house where it's more southern exposure and stays hotter even overnight. And so I'm going to be able to extend the growing season a little bit just because I can take it to the microclimates as needed throughout the seasons. So I'm really excited. This was 25 strawberry crowns that I planted, and that was just the first 4 tiers. So if you want to check this out, you can grow so much. What's really cool is they're really deep pockets, so I can actually grow. There's enough space for the roots to develop, which is really good. And then soil goes all the way through there. So it's from Greenstock, and I have got a coupon code. So if you want to check these out, I've got a coupon code. You get $10 off. and I'll pop my link in there so that you can get that discount if you decide. And they have different ones. This is the bigger one. It goes 5 up. They have smaller ones. They have all different sizes, different colors, but I highly recommend checking them out. Like I said, I have had this since February with plants in it, and it's been doing really well so far. So I'm pretty excited about it. The other thing I wanted to show you, do you see this over here? That is my new flowering herbal medicinal cottage garden, and I am so thrilled for all of the new plants that I have over here. So if you watched any of my garden tours for last year, you know that I already had some medicinal herbs in different spots. But they say that chickens are the gateway animal to homesteading. I kind of have a feeling that lavender and echinacea might be the same thing for your herbal plants. So I started with medicinal wise. Well, almost all of your herbs have medicinal properties, but I started with lavender and echinacea, and I really needed to expand this year. So I started so many of them from seed. You saw how I cold stratified a lot of those seeds. A lot of your herbal flowering seeds have to be cold stratified in order to get them to grow from seed if you're not doing a cutting or a start. So we had to put a whole new bed in because I went just a little bit overboard, but that's a good thing, right? I think it's a good thing. So let me show you what I got. You want in on the garden tour too? Say hello. So here's the cottage garden, and you can see I definitely have some space between the fence there because the cows are great reachers and they will come through and they will eat surprisingly quite a few plants. So I made sure that we had enough of a buffer there. We might have to put a few more stays, that's right there, so when they put their head through, it stops the wire from being able to stretch so they can't reach as much. We might end up putting a couple more in just to be on the safe side. Oh, and the rest of the herd says hello. Here I have valerian. So this is my valerian. Here I divided my echinacea. So it was about 3 years old. So I went ahead and divided out some of the crowns and the roots there and just transplanted that over. And then this is a lavender plant that I had growing in a container. And because it was in a containers, the plant can only get as large as the container really because it limits the root system and the growth. So I got this put in the ground. So this lavender bush should get quite a bit larger. And then I've got little baby pockets of chamomile here. And I have those because those are going to be smaller. They won't get as large. I have little pockets of those sown all along the front edge of here. And then we go back. That is my feverfew. So I started that from seed. And so I've got about 3 there of the feverfew. And then back here, which looks very small, but that is yarrow. So yarrow doesn't actually, naturally, I've not really found it growing around here. I know a lot of places you'll have just yarrow growing all over, but I put in 4 sections there of yarrow. And then behind there is marshmallow. So marshmallow is one of my favorite herbs, and it's the root that you harvest. You can use all the plants of it, but usually it's the root that we use for teas. And marshmallow root is one of my absolute favorites. I use it in so many different things, but it's got so many awesome properties to it. Here's one that's a little bit bigger. And so I started those from seed, and there is my marshmallow plants. Now I've got some more plants that I'm gonna be putting in here. Do not think I'm gonna leave that much space without growing. There's my elderberry bush there, but I don't have them all put in yet. And I have a few more on order that I didn't get started myself. So I'm so excited to be able to expand this and have the space and to just watch this all fill in with all of the beautiful, gorgeous flowers that's going to be happening here. And as you can see, it's right by our burning area. So this is our fire pit. So I've got just a couple other areas here. One is, this is what I call like my kitchen herb garden because it's right at the back of the house. So I'm cooking dinner. I don't have to put shoes on. I literally can just run out and come and grab these herbs. And so the first one that I've got here is oregano. And oregano loves to spread, kind of goes crazy. But I almost have oregano almost year round because this is that southern exposure. It stays really warm here. And so it goes into a little bit of dormancy, but I pretty much have, you just have to smell it. When you're next to your herbs, you just have to touch them and smell them. It smells so good. So this is my oregano. And then we come a little bit further down. And I do have hollyhocks, which you can grow hollyhocks. 1, they're gorgeous flowers. Why wouldn't you? But 2, you can use hollyhocks much as you do marshmallow. They have that mucilaginous property to them, which can be really great for the throat and stomach things. So I've got that here. I've got catnip. I've got a lavender bush, which is not blooming yet. It's way too early. And then I've got, which is filling in so nicely here, this is my thyme. Isn't this gorgeous? I love this yellow. It's almost like a bright Kelly green. It's so much fun. It just brings in a different color and a different texture here to this area of the garden. And it smells phenomenal as well. And then, do you see this sweet, well, this is dandelion, which can actually be very beneficial. Most people think it's a weed. It's not, so I'm gonna let it grow in here. But what I wanted to show you is, look at these. Those are flax. Yes, flaxseed. It is a beautiful flower that you can grow. Okay, so the other little area that I have, and again, this is so I can just come right out my back door, and I've got my rosemary. So this is in a container. So this rosemary bush is like 8 years old, I think. Always been in this container. Same soil. I just add compost to it and a little bit of aged manure each year. And so you can see it's in bloom here. And then I have some chives on the back side of here. But I like to keep these herbs because those are the ones I use the majority of in cooking. I also have sage and mint at the other door in a big container like this. But I like them where I can just run out and grab it as I need it. I don't want those as far from the house. So my other cottage garden, those aren't ones that I'm going to use really that much in cooking. And so I'm fine if they're a little bit further out. So I don't have to touch and smell every single one of them because they all smell amazing. So that is the garden tour. Oh, the fruit trees, which you saw if you watched the other video on how to plant fruit trees and then planting pawpaw trees, you actually saw my fruit. But let me show you what the orchard looks like right now. So it's a mini orchard, and you'll get to see all the new little fruit trees that I planted about, what was that, about 5 weeks ago? How they're doing now. So here is our orchard. You can see it's right off the side there. There's the high tunnel. There's the part of it, the other part of the garden that we're growing right now. And then the big main part with the hoops. And then you can see the blueberries and the asparagus and the raspberries behind there. And then there's the grape arbor and the cottage garden. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of how we have things spaced out and what that looks like. And then here is the orchard. So I have got my apple tree here. This is a combination apple tree, and so it's got different kinds grafted on it. Some Chehalis and some Gala Gravenstein apple tree, which is a very old heirloom variety, which I adore. Cherry tree, plum, another plum, crab apple, Honeycrisp, and at the very end, a little baby cherry tree on that side. And then these are the new trees that just went in. So that is a small Sam cherry there. And then that is my peach tree, which it is taking a lot longer to blossom out and bloom than any of the other trees. That cherry tree was just planted and you can see it's blossomed out. In fact, I was a little bit nervous, but I do have some budding. So this guy is still alive. I'm like, oh no. I get a little bit nervous about things. I'm like, I don't want it to die. So it's just a little bit later. It's a black cherry to come out than any of the other trees. You can see the crab apple just got done blossoming. All of these were in beautiful blossom. One of my favorite times of year. And you can just see the petals there have fallen. And so then this is one of the brand new trees. Which one was this? This was the Honeycrisp. So another Honeycrisp. This is, which I hear is one of the best crab apples for eating. And that is a Dolgo crab apple. So they say most crab apples are tart and don't have great flavor, but they say that this one has one of the, that you love it. Like you'll actually want to eat it. It's great for cooking and everything else. So I'm excited to see how that turns out to be. I have quite a wait. It's going to be at least 5 years. And then here is a cider apple. I've never grown cider apples, so I'm really excited, and you can see it's just beginning to bud out there. I have some pretty blossoms, and it's a Kingston black cider apple tree. So I hope you guys enjoyed that tour. I hope it gave you some ideas for things that you can do in your backyard and some different growing options. And that herbal cottage garden that I was showing you, if you're a member of the Pioneering Today Academy, you are the reason that I needed to expand that. Like I actually needed a reason, but it just sounds good because we do monthly herbal deep dives. So every single month within the membership, we do a growing lesson on a specific herb, how to grow it, how to harvest it, all those things, and then how to use it medicinally. So precautions, different ways that you can use it, doses, all those things. If you're watching this when it first came out and you want to check out the Academy, you want to check it out because we're closing for new members tonight. So depending on when you watch this, you can click on the link, see if we're open. If not, you can get on the wait list for the next time that we open for new members. But if any of that interests you, all of the things of natural herbal medicine, growing, pruning, preserving your food, it's the spot you're going to want to be. So thanks guys, and happy gardening.